I'll be honest with you. It's been a while since I've showered. Whatever. If you got a problem with that, you should probably tune out now. One of the things I love about New Mexico is how dry it is. So no matter how disgusting you get, you never get that super tacky, my arm is stuck to my chest level of disgust that you would get, say, in the tropics, because we're dry. We're high and dry people, but it's been a while. And I'm okay with that. This is kind of all over the place. I haven't posted in a while. A bunch of people reached out and said, dude, what happened to you? Why have you not posted? Thought this would be a good time to remind people, I'm not a YouTuber. This is not my job. It's not my thing. I work full time. I have an amazing job. And man, are we cranking right now on all cylinders. We have 2, 3 massive new campaigns that we're working on. We have a new brand that we're launching. And oh, by the way, next year, you might want to prepare yourself. AG is going to take on a whole new level next year. There's been calls, there have been plans made. There may or may not be someone sending themselves on assignment for AG23. Maybe that's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe hypothetically someone who's involved in AG23 will decide to send himself or herself on assignment for the publication. I don't know. That might happen. Here are some other things that may or may not be happening. Remember the Albania journal that I started and showed a film on it when it was brand new? Oh boy, is this baby taking shape. That's all I'm going to show you right now. That's all you're going to get, because you greedy jagaloons out there, you're going to want to see all of that before it's done. But you've actually inspired me, because I normally don't make the blurb notebooks in 8x10. I make them in 6x9 because they're easier to stuff in my bag. I'm digging the 8x10. I'm digging the extra real estate. I like it. I'm greedy. I'm an American. I want everything and I want it right now. And so the 8x10 is actually nice. And because it's so big, it's easier to press flat. And so I've sabotaged myself in that process, which I will share when I finally get around to making the film about the finished journal. I'm about 3/4 of the way through that. It's been a blast working in the 8x10, but I'll share that at some point. What else has been going on? Thanks for asking. Thanks for caring. Just finishing up my smoothie for the day. Probably my favorite food. I don't know if you can call a smoothie a food, but if you can, I'm going with it because it's probably my favorite thing of all time. Although Mexican food is right there too. Me gusta. I may or may not have been approached by a museum to acquire several of my books. That may or may not have happened. Maybe I'm making it up. Maybe I'm lying about it, because after all, this is YouTube. I'm not having an existential crisis. No one is trying to kidnap me. I haven't needed to be rescued, and I'm not having an emotional despair. So I can't quite fit the mold of the average YouTuber, nor am I renting a Land Rover in Iceland with a drone in my bag. So I don't know exactly where I fit in, but may or may not have been approached by a museum to acquire some of my books. I don't know. By the way, did my first blurb public event in almost 3 years. You can tell a lot about a photographer by how they approach the booth. I've been doing this for a long time. Oh, you hear all that? That's my wife. She's nesting in the other room. It's incredible what's going on behind that door. It's kind of terrifying. You can tell a lot by photographer, how they approach the booth, and how quickly they look at book samples. The faster, the quicker the view, the more mentally disturbed the photographer is. Or maybe mentally disturbed is wrong terminology or vernacular. It's the more insecure, agitated they are. The slower they look, the more potential they have. That is just my blanket statement about how photographers consume books. I may or may not have just purchased a new camera and 2 lenses. That might have just happened yesterday. There may or may not have been an email verifying this whole transaction, which is kind of alarming, but that might have happened. And also, I might be using a typewriter now for the first time in literally since I was in, let me think about this. I was still sending resumes using a typewriter until this went way later than most people. And I was doing it because I didn't have a computer, and I sent a resume to someone in New York, and the guy literally called me out and said, "Did you literally write this on a typewriter?" And it was at that point I knew I had to upgrade and get a computer. But I finally have a typewriter again, so I'm stoked about that. What you can't see just off camera over here is my titanium Salsa Fargo, the rebuild, single speed, with carbon components. I can't tell you how good this bike is, and I can't tell you how stoked I am to have a single speed. You would not think it would make a tremendous difference. It makes a monumental difference in riding the bike. It actually, here's the point I'm going to get to at some point in a later film. It makes it easier to ride the bike. And it's more fun not having gears. It's a weird thing. Never would have said that prior to having a single speed. But you know what? This is supposed to be a Q&A. And you should see the numbering and renumbering I have done on these pages. I have no idea what numbers of these are going to be. I don't frankly care. So we're going to go, we're going to move forward here. The first question, what I like about this Q&A is that there's a lot of questions that are not necessarily straight down. They're not fastballs down the center of the plate. There's some curves, there's some sliders, there's some backdoor pine tar junk coming in on the backside of the plate. Question number 1. 12 minutes in. No, 6 minutes and 24 seconds in. I didn't even check the settings. This could be 4K, this could be 1080, this could be 8K cinematic masterpiece. Because I'm all about the following, people. Question number 1. How long have you played Go? Not long. And more importantly, I have never won a game of Go, ever in my life. In fact, I don't fully understand the rules of Go and what the goal is. The surrounding game. The games that I think I'm winning, I lose by more than the games I think I'm not doing well. It's bizarre and frustrating, but I realize my intellect, my brain power, my CPU, my processor, it's not good. It's XT1 compared to XT5. And Go players, the good ones, they're not even in XT. They're like inventing new camera systems down the road. So I will never be a good Go player. I'm fascinated by the game itself. I'm fascinated by the culture, by the history of the game, as much as playing the game itself. So I haven't been playing very long. What I like is I bought a t-shirt that has a Go board on the front. And sometimes I'll wear it when I'm traveling just for fun. And I can't believe how many people will come up to me and say, "Do you play Go?" Several years ago, I'd never even heard of this game. And so it's fun because it's such a 5,000 year, the longest continuously played game in the history of our species. Might want to know something about that. But I haven't played long, and more importantly, I suck at the game of Go. I kind of suck at chess too, but I probably play a little more chess. Sorry, my eye itches for some reason. Allergies. Could be a tumor. Might be a tumor. Okay, number 2. I am curious to know what your advice is to someone who's trying to finish a long-term photo project. My advice is to go back and watch the YouTube films I made called How to Do a Long-Term Project 1 and How to Do a Long-Term Project 2. Dos. Dua. So I would start there because those films are genius. Crying is normal. You might feel a little pressure. Those are good. I don't know. I don't remember what I said in those films, but I'm assuming it's relevant information about how to do long-term projects. I love doing long-term projects. I don't do them anymore because I don't have time to do them. And they take more time now than they did before because people are much more suspicious. They assume that you're putting everything on Instagram. There's a lot more wariness that people have now than there was 10, 15, 20 years ago, where if you had a camera and a press credential 20 years ago, you could do anything. You could rob a 7-Eleven and then go back and forth across the border and no one would care. And now you can't do any of that. People are like, "What are you doing here? You can't be here. And you're going to get rich off of this. And you're going to get famous. And you're stealing from me." And all the crazy stuff that happens when our culture devolves. I'm kind of wondering what happened to us. I'm reading a book about this guy in New Mexico who lived here in the 30s and 40s. He's a writer. He's a pretty well-known guy. And, 1930s and 1940s in New Mexico is a rough place, man. There's nothing easy, nothing's coming easy here. And yet he was here, he managed to write, I don't know how many books, but you're reading about his lifestyle. And it's not like the guy had a lot of money. He was perennially broke. He was living. Like the knowledge and the culture and the experience of what they were just harder than we are. They were harder. I want to say it. I'm going to say it outright. They were more intelligent. They had less and they did more on a consistent basis than we do. It kind of feels like we've all gotten soft, like really soft. And I got to throw myself in that pile as well. Maybe I'm not as soft as you, but I'm still soft in comparison to, let's say, my dad's generation and then my grandfather's generation, who would literally just rip off your head and reach down your throat if he wanted something from you. That's kind of gone now. I'm not really sure what's happening to us or where it's headed, but I'm going to be there at F8 making some absolute solid gold photographs of this people, whatever that means. Okay, this is sort of the subclause, subcontext B drop down of that last question, which was something about long-term projects, and then there was another paragraph that I forgot to read. Something about, this is good. I'm glad I found this because it's insane. I don't know who sent this question in, and I'm not bagging on you, but it's insane. For some background, I've been working on a project and got off to a slow start. I made an assumption I would get more, quote, recognition by shooting on film and spent over a month shooting on 35 black and white film. I shifted to digital due largely to the high cost of film. I am now on solid footing and have made quite a bit of progress, but once again find myself running out of steam, or more accurately, running out of ideas. I recall you have said editors are often valuable, and I have never worked with one. I'm not concerned so much with the printing aspect, at least not at this point. Okay, let's back her up here, partner. Let's back her up. Assuming you would get recognition for shooting film. That is insane. That is ridiculous, and the only people who would ever care are a bunch of online weenies who think film is some sort of mythical, magical substance. The industry, the real people in the industry who are making decisions, these are editors, curators, collectors, art buyers, agencies, the people giving assignments, the people who know photography, the curators, the collectors, the museums, the galleries. They do not care how you made your work. That is only a fabrication of the imagination of the online world. These online people who are selling film as if it has some relevancy in the quality of the end product of the work. Does film look different from digital? Yes. Does it matter? No. Whoa, hang on here, people. The fact that you think you're going to get recognition from shooting film is just completely and utterly misguided, as is the fact that you would get recognition by shooting a certain kind of camera. Again, this is amateur hour. This is an online mythical fabrication of what people are supposed to care about. They do not. And in fact, if you're posting your work and posting with it the camera type or the film type, amateur hour. Again, there's tons of people working in the amateur hour world, and they're actually doing really well. They've built a facade around this weird thing about a camera or a film or something, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of amateur photographers have somehow determined that this is a valuable thing, hence the massive, sort of industry around film cameras and film. Nobody cares unless you are doing something with the medium that hasn't been done before, or something hyper specific to the medium that is allowing you to produce an object at the end that could not have been produced any other way. If you're not in that conversation, then you are, I almost said something really bad that would have probably made me have to put this film under a certain category of, is there offensive language? Yes. Because it's offensive to think that anyone would get recognition from shooting a film camera or using film. That ship sailed decades ago. Let go of it. Forget about it. If you want to shoot film, great, shoot it. But ultimately, someone's going to come looking for the final product, for the work. And my guess is, if you're running out of ideas, you're not going to have the work. Running out of ideas, and again, not bagging on you. I think this question, you've hit this entire audience with two things that are absolutely critically important. One is, nobody gives a crap if you shoot film or not, so stop talking about it. And number two, if you are running out of ideas, you've got bigger problems. Because how someone would run out of ideas in 2022 with the access to the research materials that we have, with the literature that we have, with the art and the music and the history that we have, is kind of astounding. If you are running out of ideas, then you need to put your camera away and you need to start reading. You need to go to the library, sequester yourself, and start reading and read everything you can get your hands on. Go to the history section and just start reading. Running out of ideas to me is almost an impossibility. I have a list of project ideas this long that I will never get to. And each one of those project ideas could have a dozen other projects offshooting from those. So, every day reading, listening to music, educating yourself about the world around you, you will cease to run out of ideas. You will be vibrating with the amount of ideas that you have. So those are really good. They weren't really delivered in question form, but because I'm such a masterful YouTube commentator that I turn them into questions. Again, that might have been a little tough love, but you had the nerve to send those in, and my job is to cut through the noise and actually tell you what's really happening. I have said this ad nauseum on this channel, the difference between the real photography world, and when I mean real, I don't mean necessarily better, I just mean real as in tangible, physical, brick and mortar, human beings, editorial, commercial, advertising, stock, the tangible brick and mortar industry, business world of photography, and the online world of photography, which in huge part is a facade. Luckily for the online world, the world loves a facade. I mean, take for example, FIFA. If you can find a more facade-like organization than FIFA in the world, I don't know where you would find it. The world loves it. So thankfully, the world loves a facade. The online world is thriving. But it ain't the same as the physical world. Have I said that before? Have I talked about my Uniball Jetstream? If I haven't, I've been remiss, because this little baby, it's life-changing. Numero tres. All I have is burnout, question mark. Burnout, question mark. No. When it comes to photography, I don't get burned out because I haven't even started yet. Again, I told you a second ago, the list of ideas. Next year, the scheming and scamming we have going on for AG, what we want to turn that into. I don't burn out on photography. I think if you're burning out on photography, one of several things could be happening. You're a wildly successful commercial photographer. Let's say you're shooting product or you're shooting catalog in particular. Catalog can be grueling because it's the same repetitive motion again and again and again and again. Most of the catalog guys make decent money, but it is repetitive. If you're doing something that's not truly who you are and what you want, or revolved around what you believe in, and you're doing it because there is an ulterior goal, like following, there's zillions of people on YouTube, for example, that eventually end up having mental health problems because it's not really them on the channel. They're studying their analytics, they're finding what the audience is looking for, and they're just regurgitating that again and again and again. And at some point, you hit a wall because you're like, this isn't really me. I'm kind of pretending that this is me. You could get burned out. I don't really know great photographers that get burned out because I think there's always so much more to do. So I don't get burned out. But again, I try to live a life that's a little bit more well-rounded. I'm not one of these people that's online in chat rooms talking about photography all day. I might be online talking about cycling or fly fishing or hiking or, I don't know, doing some other thing, practicing my hook kick. You want a good hook kick because, even in close quarters, a hook kick is good. You want that knee up high so you can really hook around. If I was you, I'd be stockpiling food and water and practicing my hook kick. A crescent kick is another nice one to have in your repertoire for close quarter combat. I'm a big spinning back kick guy. I still think that's amazing. And by the way, last weekend in MMA, there was an amazing women's fight, female fight, and knockout, spinning back kick. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. I sort of ache just from watching it. So I don't really get burned out. So I don't have that much advice for getting burned out. And the thing is, let me think back. So even when I started, I got an internship as a journalist. I shot every single day for 2 years, basically. And that was every single day on assignment. So it could be 2 assignments a day, could have been 5, all over the place, plus shooting all my own stuff on the side, plus traveling to shoot. Shot every day for at least 2 years. I never came close to getting burned out. I was more rabid to shoot at the end of the 2 years than I was at the start, because you start to realize how much more there is to do and how much better you can get as a photographer. So I don't know. People who make content, I could see them getting burned out. Content nails on a chalkboard for me. I'm just past it. I'm totally past it. I'm over it. Over it. It could be because I put beet powder in here. And beet powder, I think, is like cocaine, if I'm not mistaken. I've never done cocaine. Don't really have any desire to do cocaine. But beet powder is right there. Okay, next question, number 4. All I have is cliche, ? Michael Kenna clones. What question could have come from that? I met Michael Kenna once. Incredibly nice guy. And I like Michael Kenna's work. I actually have 2 of his prints on the wall at my casita here in town. And there are a ton of people trying to be Michael Kenna. But here's the thing about cloning. Back in the late 90s, when was the first time that I talked to young photographers who admitted to looking at who was popular in the photo industry and going out and copying everything they did, from buying the same equipment to shooting the same way, to shooting the exact same images. They would literally travel to the same places that these established photographers had been, put their tripod in the same spot and shoot the same images, and then put those images on their website. And, photographers have cloned each other forever, but this was the first time that someone blatantly admitted to doing it, but more importantly, did not see the shame in doing that. They said it as if this was the way that you became a photographer, and it was not an isolated incident. That started in the late 90s. And when the internet came and, suddenly the barrier for entry in a lot of industries dropped and fell, and you had people that just were like, well, if I build a website and buy a camera and tell people I'm a photographer, I guess I'm a photographer. There was no barrier. And to go out and to purposely clone someone else is just disgusting to me. Like, why would you do that? What is the purpose? Now, Instagram and things like that have made this exponentially worse. Now, for someone to travel around and copy what everybody else is doing, that's kind of become the norm in photography. If someone has some sort of success on something like Instagram, and probably where you see it the most now is nature photography or landscape photography or quote-unquote adventure photography. I mean, how many people popped up overnight in a van driving around with a couple of zoom lenses calling themselves adventure photographers? And I kind of look at them and I'm like, have you ever done an assignment for anyone? Literally, have you been on an assignment, or have you done a commercial shoot? Have you licensed imagery? My guess is the vast majority of them haven't. They've just seen something that someone else did that they were successful with and thought, heck, I can drive to that same national park and I can set up my tripod in the same spot and I can make the exact same images and then put those out and be like, I'm an adventure photographer too. It's kind of weird. It's like me getting on my bicycle and claiming that I'm like a professional cyclist. I did a time trial once in Texas. I did a time trial on a folding bike. This is a great story if I've never told it, and has nothing. No one asked a question about this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And if I've said this story before, well, then just cover your ears. My brother's a really good cyclist. He does Ironman triathlons, and he's way better than I ever will be. I went to Texas a few years ago, and my brother's like, hey, I'm going to do this time trial. You should do the time trial. And I'm like, I don't do time trials. I don't race. And I said, the only bike I have is this folding bike. And my brother's like, yeah, you'll be fine. And my brother lies about cycling. That's one thing you have to know. And this is not just my brother. It's a lot of cyclists, especially people who are good. Hey, how far are we riding? 20 miles. You got to double everything. So if they tell you 20, it's going to be at least 40. Hey, what's the altitude gain? Oh, it's flat. The whole thing's flat. You know it's going to be nothing but mountains. How's the wind situation? Or where are we riding? Is it windy? Nope, there's never any wind. You know it's going to be gale force headwind the entire way. So that's kind of what happens when you ride with these people. So my brother says, oh, it's like a 20-mile time trial out and back. So I go, okay, I don't know why I agreed to do this. I was like, okay, fine. So I'm on a folding bike. This time trial, there's people with like aero helmets and disc wheels and body suits, and I'm first of all, again, on a 20-inch wheel folding bike. And I think I was riding in like a tank top and short shorts. I don't know what it was. It was awful. So my brother goes to the organizer without me knowing and says, hey, my younger brother's coming to this time trial, and my younger brother is fast. He is really fast. So, of course, I don't know this. So you go to the time trial, and the faster you are, the further back in the pack you start. And you start at 2-minute intervals. And the goal is you want to try to pass as many people as you can, the people that started 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes ahead of you, and you do not want anyone behind you to pass. So I start to realize something is wrong when I get to where I get my starting number, and I realize I'm all the way in the back. And everyone around me has skin suits and disc wheels and aero helmets and bars, and they're like professional time trial people, and I'm on a folding bike. And I was like, something is not right. And so the organizer comes up to me and he looks at me and he looks down at the bike and he goes, you're not going to ride that, are you? And I go, it's the only bike I have. And then I put it together. I was like, oh, someone was messing around with me. So at the last minute, a friend of mine in Texas who used to race professionally in Europe says, hey, I'm going to ride too. Now this guy's legs are unbelievable. Like people who don't ride look down at his legs and go, dude, like your legs, they're huge. His calves are bigger than my thighs, and the vascularity of his legs, his veins just pop. And of course, his legs are totally shaved. So he starts 2 minutes behind me. So now I realize he's 2 minutes behind me. And I'm like, I know he's going to pass me, but I just going to want to try to prolong the pain as long as possible. So the thing starts. I take off on my folding bike. It felt like 90 seconds later, my friend passes me. He's sitting up in the saddle, stuffing something in his jersey with his hands off the bars. He's not even paying attention. He's passing me so fast. But the funny thing happens is I start to gain on the guy in front of me. So I pass the guy that started 2 minutes in front of me. And as I'm passing him, he looks down and looks over at me. And the look of just disgust on his face and failure. And he goes, oh no, I'm being passed by a folding bike. So I pass him, and I think I passed the guy in front of him. And then as I got to the finish line, the guy that was in front of him, I was closing on him, and he turned around and saw me. And there's a crowd at the end, like cheering. He turned around and saw me, and the look of panic that he was about to get passed by a folding bike at the finish line in front of the crowd gave him this superhuman burst of energy. And he was like Lance on EPO, man. He just exploded. It was like he had just started riding. That's my story for the day, and I'm sticking with it. So let's go back to the questions, shall we? Question number 5, how to find a designer. This is a great question and not the easiest one in the world. Finding a book designer is critically important for most of us if we're going to put a project out in the world that is forward-facing, public-facing. I'm going to do a book, and I'm going to try to sell it to people I don't know, or I'm going to do a book that is really representative of me as an artist. Most of us do not have the design chops to do that. So self-publishing doesn't mean that you do everything by yourself. You've got to often reach out. You might need a photo editor. You might need a designer. You might need somebody who's more of a type specialist. You might need a marketing person. You might need someone to help you with distribution. So there are a couple of resources. You have tons of design organizations, AIGA. You've got Design Observer. You can also look at the photo book contests and see who's won the photo book contest. Like Aperture Foundation, Perry Photo just announced their winners. There's about 30 different books that are in the winning categories. Each one of those is going to have a designer associated with it. And you can go through and try to find a designer that fits you. Just remember, these people are very valuable. And you are going to have to pay them a significant amount of money to do the design job. And this is often something that photographers will balk at. They'll say, "Oh, what do you mean it's $4,000 to do book design for a publication? No, I'll do it on my own." And then they end up making something that looks self-published and it doesn't do well. And then they get frustrated and they blame the self-publishing system and say, well, this doesn't work. And next time I'm going to a publisher. And then they end up ponying 20, 30, 40, 50,000 upfront to a publisher. And then they're kind of ticked off about that. Putting an illustrated book out into the world, into like really putting a book out. I'm not talking about doing a small run art book or publishing something in 100 or 200 copies, which I think is an incredibly strategic methodology for the vast majority of all of us. I think doing a book in a quantity of 100 or 200, as opposed to going through a traditional publishing model and trying to get 1,500, 2,000, at the very high end, 3,000 copies of a book. When you've got 2,000 copies of a book, that comes on a pallet. You're going to need marketing and you're going to need a distribution methodology, and you better have a good plan in place. Whereas if you do a book in a run of 100 or 200, you can potentially sell that book out before it's even printed by going out to your community and saying, I've got a new book coming. This is what it's going to be. This is what the cost is. If you pre-order, you're going to get a little treat, and then you can move on with your life. 100. But to do that, design is a key element. It often gets overlooked. I do not have design chops. Someone wrote me, a book packager wrote me this morning and said, I've got a person with an interesting project, but they're not technically savvy. Can you consult with them to help design this book? And I said, no, because you don't want me as a design consultant. I gave them a name of someone else here in town. And I said, I think this person would be good because they have a lot of overlap and similarities. And this person has designed blurb books for other people in the past. And by the way, the blurb book in this equation is simply a maquette. It's simply a book dummy because will eventually go to a publisher, because I think the project has legs for a publisher. Know what I mean? Question 6. Can you talk about wine? No, I can't. I don't know anything about wine. I can tell when it's red or white or rosé or a nice Chianti. I don't know anything about wine. I've had incredibly good wine in my life because I have friends who are complete wine heads. I have friends who've written books about wine, friends who have vineyards. I know people who live on vineyards who wine is a big part of their life. And so when I'm with them, they serve fantastic wine, and I can tell the difference between a glass of fantastic wine and a glass of wine that sucks. That's just there to get hammered, some Boone's Farm, some Tickle Pink. So no, I'm not a person to talk about wine. Or beer for that matter. I mean, I can kind of drink any beer, whatever. But I'm getting older, man. The drinking days are slacking off, Because again, it's midlife crisis. You hit 53, you're like, man, I'm on the backside of the mountain. I just hope I don't speed up and run out of control and crash and burn too early. But there's a lot to be done. I feel like I haven't started yet. And so anything that gets in the way of work is going to get cut out. So I still drink, but not nearly like what it was in the past. I mean, my brother and I, the fact that we're still alive is a testament that, I don't know, luck. It just has to be luck. There were so many close calls. I could give you a list. I could tell stories from now to the next 10 days of near misses with my brother and I just being absolutely insane. And he's not that way either anymore. He's got his act together. So do I. Number 7. A question I would like to put forward in your Q&A videos: you have often spoken about having an elevator pitch when starting a project. Yes, could you give me some more advice and show how we can create an elevator pitch? It would be interesting to know what the elevator pitch was for the project in Sicily and maybe some other examples. So the project in Sicily, I didn't actually, at the time in the field, I didn't need an elevator pitch because there were no tourists there at all. It was crazy, which was one of the best things about doing that project. I'd be out in these small towns in Sicily. I don't speak Italian. I don't speak Sicilian. I'm not a Catholic, and I'm not religious. So there was absolutely no sense for me working on that project, even though I just loved working on that project. I was mystified by this concept of faith People who have legitimate faith, not the televangelists, not the crazy Republican, pseudo-Christian people who are trying to get votes, but these like everyday people who put on display very passionate levels of faith. And that ran the gamut of age. Be it a small Sicilian village, you look over and there's a 15-year-old boy who looks like an Armani commercial, just dressed like insanely well, just gorgeous, super hip kid, crying as the religious procession passes through his town. I was mystified by that. I don't have that faith. I'm not religious at all. And so I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And at the time in these small Sicilian villages, there were no tourists, to the point where the cops would come and they'd be like, what are you doing? Now, I'm coming from, at the time, I'm living in LA where the cops come, you better be ready because they're going to crack your skull for like no reason. So I see the Sicilian, the Carabinieri or the cops coming, and I'm like, this isn't going to end well. They're going to like arrest me or I'm going to go to jail. And they'd be like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, they'd find someone who could speak English. They would translate. Suddenly a crowd would gather. It'd be the cops, me, locals. My wife was there, another photographer. And they'd be like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I came here from America, and this whole religious procession thing that you got going on, I find kind of interesting. And they'd be like, what? You came all the way from America to our town? Do you want to see the jail? Do you want to stay in the jail? Do you want to go to my mom's house? Do you want to have dinner with the family? It was unreal. The doors would just open because they couldn't believe that we'd come all the way over there to see their procession, their small town. And so I didn't really need an elevator pitch. There was probably more of a need for an elevator pitch once I was done with the project and then trying to put the work out into the world, because American photo editors wouldn't often know much about Sicily. It's photo editors, I did a project in Cambodia. Photo editors didn't know where Cambodia was. Again, this is America. Most of us can't find the country on a map. So, you got to pitch it in some way. The thing is, photography has been so watered down by things like Instagram that most people do not have the bandwidth or attention span to really pay attention to what it is you're saying. So you've got to have a pitch that cuts through the noise quickly, concisely, and something that says, this is what I'm doing, why, and why it's important. And that's it. And how you get there should be personal. If it sounds like an artist statements are nails on a chalkboard for me. 99% of what I see and read in artist statements is the biggest bunch of crap you've ever seen in your life. That is mind-numbing. In fact, it's kind of entertaining because some of them are so awful and pretentious and filled with art speak. You just want to keep reading it over and over again. It's like opening a container of sour milk and you go, oh, God, that's horrible. Oh, it's really bad. That's how bad some of these artist statements are. Don't do that. Keep it personal, but actually explain to me what it is you're doing and why, and do it concisely. It's got to be about a 15-second thing. Sadly, our attention span, the days of the 7-minute film are gone, and the 3-minute film, gone, 2-minute, gone, 60 seconds. Now you're getting people like, hey, can you do a 15-second film? I can, but is that really the direction we want to go? I don't know. Okay, we're almost done here. Now, the last question, question 8, I guess I'm going to have to do it. It's about licensing images. And here's the thing. I had a guy, this is a couple years ago now. I was talking about archiving online. What the hell? That's like possessed. There's like a camera, candle holder that just started shaking. It's weird. There's a lot of ghosts out here. I said something about archiving, and this guy wrote me and said, you're such an arrogant, a-hole because you're talking about archiving, and the only thing that's important is getting your work online immediately on places like Facebook. And I was like, okay, I am an a-hole. So that guy's incredible intuition on his part. However, if you are living in the online space, that probably makes perfect sense. And if you are living in the online space and you're happy, great, buy a condo. But for me, I'm not living in the online world. I much prefer the sort of industry side of photography, where licensing images is how people survive. It's how they make, not all, but how many photographers make a living, and also how you're going to make a living in the future. So for those of you who don't understand this, Licensing an image means that someone comes to you and says, I want this image in this region for this amount of time at this level of exclusivity. For example, I want international rights for 1 year, and I want total exclusivity of this image, meaning that no one else gets it. That comes with a very high licensing fee. If the client says, I want this for New Mexico only for 1 week, and I don't care who else uses it, lower licensing fee. But that same image can be licensed over and over and over. I have friends who are licensing images from 50 years ago. Each individual image has made tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. This is the part of like the online photography world. There's a lot of people operating in the online photography world who have no idea that this even exists. So if you think that the key ingredient here is to get your work on Facebook, fine. If you're happy and you're doing that, keep doing it. But for those of us who are making images that see some sort of value in the long-term lineage of an image, it often comes through licensing. My portraiture was represented by an agency, and that work was under a licensing agreement. I did not do microstock. I did not do royalty-free. I only did what was called RM, Rights Managed Images. So if someone wanted to use one of my images, they had to go through the agency and they had to license that image under those parameters that I just gave you. Time frame, region, exclusivity, whatever. And that's how images were licensed. So the same file over time is made. Each individual image is a revenue stream. That is about licensing. Now, sadly, many of those agencies are gone. Many of the people who are licensing images are gone. And clients now know that there's an entire range of photographers out there who don't know about this, who can be taken advantage of. Where people say, oh, I'll just pay you a one-time fee for that image, and I own the copyright. I know photographers who give away their copyright. It's crazy. That's just the space that we're in. There's so many photographers that came into the industry with digital and when social media took over who didn't understand what they were giving away. And once you give it away, it's gone. If you give something away to a client, they will never, ever pay you for something again if they don't have to. Clients are often better business people than the photographers are. So you've got to really bone up on the business side. And licensing is a really great thing. It's a great thing to see an image be repurposed again and again and again throughout the world. And that's basically it in a nutshell. So license. By the way, you can also license all kinds of things. I know a guy who does exhibitions of his work. So he'll frame up a set of images, let's say 40 frames. Printed, framed. He will license those to institutions, organizations, corporations for corporate artwork. So the corporation will license that work. It will go into their lobby or go into their office facility. And a year goes by and they have the option of replacing the show with a new show or relicensing that set of images. That's a smart thing. That's what licensing is, and having an archive, an accessible archive is, if you're a working photographer, to me, is a critical piece of the puzzle. You've got to have a harness on what you have and be able to get that work to people when they need it, and having an archive is critical. Facebook, not so much. To me, like even putting images on there is insulting in some way after what we know about Facebook, which could be a whole nother Q&A thing because I'm already at 45 minutes. Can you hear that? I should probably go. It's been, my wife's trapped in her office. I left her food and water, but it has been 45 minutes and she's going to be ticked off. She's going to be like a Wolverine. I'll be back eventually, maybe. I have one film I'm thinking of making called Parallel Project. I think it's a good film. I have no idea when I'm going to do it. It's not going to be in the next couple weeks. But eventually I'll be back here on YouTube, and maybe I'll see you then.